Hello, and welcome back to the AI Insiders Podcast, the flagship podcast of acronyms, because this is coming to you from USC's ISI AID, FTW. I think I'm not too old to say that. I'm Adam Russell, the director of the AI division here at the Information Sciences Institute at the University of Southern California. I'm your host as well, with the goal of getting to the For the Win, that's FTW, for those of you who are not hip enough, For the Win with this episode. I'm taking this opportunity of being relatively new to the Institute to reach out and get to know the humans behind AI at ISI. Because how things turn out now ultimately is a question for those humans, for we humans, who are the ones who are creating, launching, pouring money into, screaming about, falling in love with, hoping for, fearing, or just trying to understand what the heck is happening with all this AI stuff. And I'm confident we can get there because I'm looking at my guest right now, and I've had the good fortune of knowing him for several years. In fact, he's one of the reasons I jumped at the chance to come to ISI, because he is, by any account, a good human. Fred works with me here at ISI in the AI division. He is a research assistant professor at USC. He is the associate director of data science at USC, and he is a principal scientist at USC, ISI, which leads you to ask the question, how is he able to do all these things and presumably still sleep? Because I have reason to believe he is, in fact, human. And we're going to find that out now with the following interview. Fred, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Adam.
So, Fred, if you've had a chance to look at any of the other, listen to any of the other podcasts, you know that I like to start this off by asking you to do something that currently is physically impossible, but because we have these amazing capacities for imagination, I get the opportunity nonetheless to ask you to go back in time to talk to 10-year-old Fred, and I want to hear you explain to yourself, what are you doing now at ISI?
Thanks, Adam. I think the best way to explain what I do to a 10-year-old is that I understand people with computers. So trying to understand how people navigate the world around them and using all, state-of-the-art and recent AI and NLP tools to accomplish that.
10-year-old Fred is really smart, but still wants to know, what do you mean NLP tools? Slow down, Brainiac.
Yeah, I guess it took 25 years ago. That wasn't really a thing, was it? Yeah. So understanding people through the way they speak, the way they write, more importantly, how what they write down influences how they're going to behave and what you can understand about their preferences from what they say and do.
So NLP standing for natural language processing, right? Just
Right.
Make sure we unpack that. Okay, so why are you at ISI? I know what you're doing. Why are you doing it here?
I think ISI is a unique and fantastic organization. It combines really both of the things that I want from life, which is to work with students and to do cool stuff. At a traditional academic institution, it's really hard to put together teams of the size that we do and have access to the resources that we have in order to accomplish those goals. And at a traditional research lab, like say IBM, for example, it's really hard to work with students. Of course, you get an intern every now and then, but that's not quite the same thing, right? You want to build people up, you want to help them grow, and I think ISI is one of the few places where you can really do both.
Interesting. What do you like most about working with students?
The new ideas. The ability to be kind of agile and scrappy. I really don't think that we would have been able to embrace, say, LLMs as quickly as we could have if we'd had a bunch of, 50-year-old scientists who'd been doing this for 30 years, It's just not the same thing. Students really are ambitious. They have cool ideas. It makes every day feel a little bit different, which is really, really important.
That's a great observation. And again, just unpack it. LLMs are the large language models that are sort of all the rage right now.
Yes, indeed.
ChatGPT and other things. So let me ask you a two-part and equally unfair question. The first is, what are you most worried about with AI? And then asking you, again, unfairly to represent a generation, what do you hear from your students? Like, what are they most worried about with AI?
What am I most worried about? I think it's the thing I've always been most worried about with these new technologies, which is people who use them without really thinking about what they're doing. These are really powerful tools, but they also have a propensity to reinforce bias, reinforce unfairness. We've seen this story time and time again, and I think that's another way to do that. For example, already there are companies that are using LLMs to screen resumes, right? What could go wrong, right? I mean, it's this is
computer says no. That's right. Yeah.
Exactly. And this happened 10 years ago with AI too. Amazon, they built a resume screening tool, and shock and awe, it turned out that it was biased against female candidates.
Right.
So they had to scrap that tool, and here we are, not even 10 years later, with the same story, just now with LLMs. And that worries me. That's one of the things that keeps me up at night. You asked me about my students. I think they would probably say roughly the same, and we see that in the papers they're writing and the problems they choose to work on. I don't know which way that causal arrow goes. Maybe I'm brainwashing them. Maybe they're brainwashing me. I'm not exactly sure, but yeah, I think they would probably say roughly the same thing.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is the role of universities in this space, because as you mentioned, a lot of this is being driven by commercial investment and that, market race, as it were. Give me a good answer as to, why we still need universities in AI.
Why we still need universities in what role? To teach, to do research, or what do you
tell me? Like what do they bring that's unique to the ecology, so that if I'm the government, for example, now they're thinking about with the president's executive order, where to put more funding, right, to sort of ensure safe AI, better AI. Why do I need universities in that ecosystem?
Well, I sure hope as instructors we're doing more than ChatGPT would to instructors, our students. We're here to teach them how to think, not how to fill in an answer on a quiz. ChatGPT is very good at the latter, right? It can explain a concept for you, but actually, like, teaching someone how to think, how to embrace a particular concept, and how to apply it in new areas, I think that's really one of the cornerstones of education, and that's part of what educators are responsible for doing. And I'm not so sure that LLMs can do that well yet. As far as research goes, I think that answer is even more clear. I think our job is to work on the questions that companies aren't brave enough to answer, or they don't have the resources or interest to answer, right? We care deeply about these bias and fairness questions. It's clear that the companies that are just throwing these resume screeners at their pile aren't. And it's our job to make sure that these things work for everybody.
Check. So what would you be doing if you weren't in AI?
I think I would either be an anesthesiologist or a campaign manager.
I did not see either of those coming. Okay, unpack that, please, for me a little bit.
Anesthesiology is really interesting because there are so many parameters you have to get right, and there are huge stakes at play, right? It's just really fascinating. And campaign manager, I think, is probably even more of a straight line. How do you communicate with people? How do you understand what their real concerns are? And make sure you can align kind of your messaging and hopefully your actual policies with what those things ultimately are. So
I see the parallel. Yeah, nicely done. Anesthesiologist, though, that's a good one. Haven't heard that before. Do you think, though, that we need regulations on AI? It sounds to me like to get where you want to get, there's going to be a lot of AI innovation that's required. But there's also a lot of talk right now about the need to constrain and regulate AI. Where do you fall on that debate?
I think that regulation in some ways is really useful, especially useful now where we kind of have this situation where there are really just a few companies, or let's say actors, who are really in a position to make a meaningful LLM. But I think one of the things we're going to see is that that's going to become less and less true. I think as there's more compute, better algorithms, et cetera, more people are going to be able to build and train their own LLMs. And while regulation's great, there's going to be more that's needed in order to kind of enforce these things. But the bottom line is, I think having a discussion about what are the best ways to go forward, what are the best principles for these types of regulations, is really, really important. In fact, if anything, I think we were late to the game for these kinds of discussions.
Yeah. One thing, so we may have learned something from social media, but to your point, glad those discussions are happening now. But it's interesting to me how people try to draw historical parallels with where we are with AI and past technologies, either in terms of like, oh, we've been panicked about technology before and it's worked out fine. Or alternatively, when we regulate nuclear capabilities, facilities, when we regulate aviation, like that somehow is a perfect analogy with AI. I don't buy any of those. I think there's something really different here. I'm not going to argue that with you, but I am interested, given where you sit right now and the complexity that we face. If you could have dinner with one person, either alive or from history, that you think would help shed some light on kind of where we are at this moment in history and perhaps have some sound advice on how we should think about it and go forward, who would that person be and why?
I think I would choose maybe Kurt Vonnegut. I think he'd be a good person to kind of tell us where we should go with these kinds of things. Always appreciated his take on things like war, humanity, etc. in his books. I would love to hear what he would have to say about where we are right now.
Yeah.
Also, you drew these different parallels with like regulation of airplanes, etc. I guess the way I think of it is sort of in terms of climate change. It's like, we knew for a long time that climate change was, driven by humans. So it could be a problem, et cetera. And if we'd done the right thing when we knew, instead of waiting 50 or so years to actually start to care about this, we could have done something. We could have nipped it in the bud and we wouldn't be seeing these, terrible outcomes that we're seeing now. Ice caps melting, rivers drying, the drill. And I think right now is when we should do something, for AI as well. We need to stop, wringing our hands and things like that, and actually come up with some principles that should drive how we build these applications going forward.
What in the discussions that are happening that you are attending to, what do you think is the most misunderstood concept in AI? Like, what's the thing that's getting in our way, perhaps, of making progress and coordinating around this problem?
I think maybe lay people's understanding of fairness and bias. A lot of the people I talk to outside of this field, they seem to think that, because an algorithm did it, there's no way that it could be unfair. And I think that's something that we really have to address, in public discourse, is that these things learn from past data, and past data has, all of the errors that have been made throughout history. And if we're not careful, we're just going to propagate them. And to think that, because an algorithm did it, it's just is simply not true. Hundreds of examples from the literature and industry that show that that's the case.
Interesting. Yeah, and that's to your point. Like we need to be better calibrated with these kinds of tools that we're using. What have you found to be the most sort of counterintuitive thing that you've learned in AI? What surprised you the most?
I think the most counterintuitive thing in AI for me is probably overfitting. So you kind of would think that, more and more is going to be better and better, but that isn't always the case. And overfitting is a really simple way to kind of show that. I mean, if you learn too much about your training data, it prevents your ability to generalize, right? This is, reared its head in lots of different ways. There are examples of, unintended learning. So identifying, pictures of cows, and you learn that the algorithm's actually just looking for, a field of grass when it does something like that. I think a more practical and maybe harmful example is fairness, right? So if it overfits, it will learn to make things like, loan decisions based upon your demographic variables, which have nothing to do with your ability to pay back a loan, right? Yeah, I think that's probably at least the most counterintuitive thing. I don't know about unexpected.
What is the technical area of AI? And again, you're talking to 10-year-old Fred. I didn't tell you that. I brought it back for the past. What is the most technical area of AI that you think is either underinvested in or underappreciated or under-resourced?
Explainable AI, for sure. And I think the thing about explainable AI is it gets some lip service every now and then. But
so tell me what you mean. Tell yourself.
So explainable AI fundamentally means advancements to help an algorithm explain why it made the decision it made. That can be through basically the decision function itself. Some people make visualizations, things like this. And I think that's really a cure for a lot of the concerns we have, right? I think if coming back to that CV filtering algorithm we were talking about, right? If you could really look and see, okay, very clearly, this is why your CV was rejected, then we can have a conversation about that. That's really going to be medicine for these concerns that we're going to see again and again going forward. And I would really like to see more investment in these types of things.
I promised at the beginning of this episode that I'm a human. If you had one question to ask me that would give you the most confidence that I am in fact human, what would that question be?
Well, I'd ask you to identify all of the traffic lights on this picture I have here.
Yeah, well, I'll tap out right there. And there's another human you've lost. My web traffic to. Yeah, boy, that one got crushed pretty quickly, didn't it? Captcha. Oh man. So it sounds to me, you made your way here. Glad you are, but how do you think about yourself? Do you have heroes in this space? Is there anybody you think like that's the sort of person who represents to me kind of cardinal north of how to do things right? Anybody come to mind?
Cardinal north of how to do things right. I mean, I certainly have heroes. I mean, every person is complicated, so I don't know if I would stand by every single decision they've ever made. But
I didn't say perfect. I said heroes, not perfect.
Cardinal north that's a high bar.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, there are some real real heroes in this space. I mean, Claude Shannon is definitely one. He did some amazing things early on that laid the groundwork for AI. Jeff Hinton is another. I mean, he really is a person who stood by this stuff when the compute and the data wasn't around yet to make it work. Then it's good he did, right? Because now we're seeing this kind of renaissance of AI. I guess those are my answers. Yeah.
The secret to heroes I find sometimes is people forget that they oftentimes work best when they work in teams. But when the heroes come together, they all sort of bring their own superpower to that team. If you had to say, what is your superpower? What do you bring to the team?
That's a good question. I think I have an ability to kind of blend ideas from different fields in a way that maybe many of my colleagues don't. Not necessarily at ISI, but that I see on other projects and things like this. And I think that has been a strength, being able to kind of combine the best of everybody rather than having them work in silos. I think I'd like to claim some ingenuity for identifying interesting problems, things like that. That's worked out for me a couple times over the years. Yeah, that's probably enough.
Enough superpowers. Yeah. I don't want to brag really, but yeah, no, that's right. Those are indeed superpowers. Do you think you can learn those, or do you think you just have them naturally?
I think you can learn them. I think the key to perhaps both of those things is humility, being able to kind of have an open mind for what people in other disciplines or with different backgrounds are saying, and really listening to them when they try to tell you what's going on. You can definitely learn that.
On that note, I'm glad you're part of the team here at ISI. Thanks for taking the time today to chat with me, deal with some of my curveballs that I throw at you. But I think again, anybody can read up on a lot of the technical things that are happening, but understanding the people behind it who are doing that, that I think is at least as important, if not more so. I really appreciate taking the time to be here and giving me, as well as I think our listeners, a little more insight into your why AI, why this, why these problems, as well as your what. And again, at least for me, reminding me that we can remain more on the optimistic side of apocalyptic optimism, partly because we have people like you in the mix, focusing on really making sure that AI serves to make the world better for us. And because it's a world in which we're increasingly interconnected, that means we need to make things better for all of us. So I appreciated you making that point as well. Hopefully you'll continue to do your best to make sure AI helps to scale up the best things about us: teamwork, purpose, empathy, creativity, all these things we've touched on, and ultimately concern for each other. And for the fact that you bring all those to work each day, I thank you. And I thank you again for being a much appreciated colleague and a human behind AI at ISI.
All right. Thanks, Adam. Appreciate you having me on, and it's great working with you as well.
Yeah, I appreciate it. All right. Well, if you enjoy these short podcasts, please do the thing, like us, give us stars, all the stars, spread the word, send us feedback, and we'd love it if you just keep listening. We are getting some good feedback, by the way, so hopefully we'll continue to improve on these podcasts. And then also please join us again for another episode of AI Insiders, where we're going to do our best to continue to navigate our way through this weird world, doing what humans do best when they face these kinds of challenges, working together as if all our lives depend on each other, because they do. So for now, for the future, fight on.